Welcome to the Educated Investor Podcast. My name is Philip Hernandez. I am a musician and an educator with an obsession for real estate investing. This week, my guest is Richard Mercado. Richard Mercado is a good friend of mine. He's actually my accountability partner. And we check in with each other each week about our goals and what we're working on and what we're working through, and support each other and hold each other to the highest. It's been a great honor having him as my accountability partner. And he has done a ton over the last 4 years. I love that he started his investing journey right before his 50th birthday. Which a lot of people in my community are, in their 30s or 40s, and like, oh my God, I should have started when, insert the date here. And he has built a portfolio that is really rocking right now. 14 doors that he doesn't have any partners on. They're all his. And I think 3 of his properties have no mortgage. He owes free and clear. And, he has had an awesome attitude and perspective on it the whole time. I think he shared some really great stories, and I hope you get a lot of value from his journey. Enjoy. All right, Richard Mercado, my friend, thank you so much for coming on the Educated Investor Podcast. I'm just so stoked to have this conversation that we are going to share with other people, because you and I, we are having conversations every week. Richard's my accountability partner.
Yeah.
That we're holding each other to sort of our goals and where we're trying to see ourselves. And I think it's so important. And also, you have done some really cool stuff in the last 4 years of your real estate journey. And so I'd love for you to share your portfolio, what it looks like right now, and then we can go on the journey of how you got there.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me on this. I'm excited to be here and talk with you in this setting. So, you and I have been talking weekly for a while, which has been hugely beneficial for me, just to have somebody to bounce ideas off of at your caliber. So, thank you for that, and for sharing this platform. So my portfolio right now, I have 14 doors, most of which are in North Carolina. 4 years ago, when I started my real estate journey, honestly, I have Brandon Turner to thank, as most of us do in Bigger Pockets, because I took his 90-day challenge, and within the first 45 days, I already had two properties under contract in North Carolina. So that kind of lit a fire on me. I think I was kind of at that stage. A friend of mine had turned me on to Bigger Pockets in October of 2019. I tried a little bit on the stock market. I tried some other things. Didn't really feel like I had good control of that. I kind of felt like I was rolling the dice. Love the idea of real estate, but had no idea how to get started. And she turned me on to Bigger Pockets, and it just kind of clicked. The light bulb went on. Like, wow, this is something I think I could do. I get it. So I took that challenge and got 2 properties under my belt in North Carolina, and haven't looked back since. I've been having a blast with it. So 14 doors right now. I'm currently developing 2 more here. It's a duplex that I'm going to be building up from the ground up. Supposed to break ground next week on these. So we finally have been at the tail end of our permitting process, getting final approval with the city of South Pasadena here in California, and looking forward to start knocking some stuff down next week. So,
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to go into what each of those first purchases look like, but can you describe a little bit about what you were doing before you got into real estate investing, and what drew you to real estate investing in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for 30 years now, my other hat has been as a production sound mixer in film and television. I'm basically the guy sitting behind a mixing console on set, recording anything that the actors say. That's my job. For the last 10 years of those 30, I've been on a TV show called The Goldbergs. It's an ABC show. It's kind of the holy grail for a crew person. Been a great place to go to Sony Studios every day and do that. And in my unique position, I've had the luxury of being able to kind of sit a little further away from set if I need to, And in downtime while they're doing lighting, I could be on my laptop looking up deals and making connections. So being able to have that luxury of a little extra freedom on set to start this real estate journey has been a real gift. Also for the fact that I work about 120 days a year on that show, or it just finished up last year. But the rest of the year was mine to spend working on building a real estate portfolio and spending time with family, which I really highly value at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, can you talk about so I mean it sounds like your career is going pretty well and you reached a certain apex of stability and also being well compensated for your work. Uh, what even made you decide that this was something that was important for you to dedicate your time to?
Yeah, well, I'm a bit of a late bloomer. About 5 years ago, I had a big why come into my life, and that was my kids.
Mm.
I got married at 49, and a month before my 50th birthday, I had a son who's 5 year old now. So if you do the math, I'm 55. And up until that point, I really didn't. I had no concern finances. I was fine. I was single, free. You know, um, my wife came into the equation. She's the one who actually pushed us to buy a house. I was kind of like I didn't want the responsibility and all that. So I've heard her credit for kind of tipping the scales toward that. And then when I had my son, I started doing the math, and I realized traditionally I'd be retiring at about age 65, right around the time that he'd be going into college if he decides to do that. And it was going to take a huge financial hit as far as that. I mean, I considered myself to be in a pretty good job. I mean, film and TV industry pays pretty well, and I had one of the better positions. But when you start adding kids in the equation, the lifestyle that I wanted to continue or grow, being able to travel with my wife and eventually with my kids and all that, I was having a hard time just adding things up. So it became quickly apparent to me that I needed to break out of my pension lifestyle and the
Mm.
W-2 and create something on the side that could grow, perhaps leave some legacy for my kids and allow me to have the lifestyle and the financial freedom that I wanted to pursue things. Um, as I mentioned, I tried a few other things before real estate kind of clicked for me, and it just made sense. And my wife got on board with it pretty immediately as well. She knew that real estate was a powerful vehicle. She didn't know much more than that. That's when I kind of just started devouring books and took the Brandon Turner Challenge and got into real estate.
Why did
So
real
yeah,
estate make sense for you? Like compared to some of these other things, like there's so many different ways that people direct their energies from stocks to crypto to, I know people putting money in CDs, so, but
yeah.
like why real estate?
I think control had part to do with it.
Mm,
At going into 50 and not feeling like I had 30, 40 years of W-2 potential work years ahead of me,
hmm.
I felt like I needed to do something a little bit more aggressive, but I also wanted to have control. And with stocks, I felt like unless I really had a passion for digging into the valuation of companies and understanding that, I really felt like I was rolling the dice, and
Mm,
I could do the long-term play and bet on the big companies, S&P 500 to that thing, and probably do well over time. But at 50, I didn't feel like I had that time. So
yeah,
I felt like real estate was a vehicle that I really could control, and I love the idea of value add and increasing value and being able to pick my market. So I picked that estate, having control over certain factors that I thought would be, more within my understanding. Um, and at that point, when I started investing out of state, I thought we were at the top of the market. This was 4 years ago. Everybody was already talking about bust. That
yeah.
the recession. Even 4 years ago, people were already talking about the recession. Um, and I said, well, if there are going to be opportunities out there in the coming year or two, and I wait for those opportunities, and I have no experience in real estate, how am I going to take advantage of those opportunities? I don't know how to buy a house. I don't know how to work with lenders. I don't have a property manager. I don't even know a market at that point. So I said, let me educate myself. And I'm a strong advocate that the best way to educate yourself is by doing.
Hmm.
Certainly, you have to read and analyze and do all that. But taking action and getting out there and doing, you're going to learn way more than just what you can find in a book.
Totally. Yeah. So you're in this situation where you know that you want to use real estate, that's the direction, but there's so many ways even that real estate that can be that people make money in real estate. How did you decide the market and the strategy, and like how did you even funnel down all that information into the action that you end up taking? And what was the first purchases that you made?
Yeah, well, I think if I hadn't had kind of a little bit of a guru in perhaps Brandon Turner and Bigger Pockets,
Hmm.
and some other folks who had had some success that I was able to call and get some things. I mean, the first challenge was picking a market. I had been to North Carolina, although not in any kind of extensive time there, but I had been to Durham once, so I had a little bit of a familiarity with that city. Even when I had gone there a few years earlier, I'd recognized that it was a city that seemed to be on the upswing. And then just from what people were telling me and what I was reading, the indicators for potential growth in real estate, population growth, a city that seemed to be adding jobs, job growth. Durham, North Carolina had a very strong tech sector at that point, great
That's
universities,
that's like one of the best markets to have invested in the last 5 years.
Yeah, but the funny thing is when I got there, 4
Uh-huh.
years ago, I felt like I was late to the party. I mean,
Wow.
like there was already tons of properties being built.
Hmm.
The people who had gotten in a few years earlier, I got in 20 tail end of 2019, 2020, but like a couple people I met had got in 2016 purely by luck because they had no way of knowing. I mean, they said that they didn't even feel comfortable walking down the streets at night in the
Wow.
city. By the time I got there, that had all changed and was rapidly, expanding even further. But so I thought maybe I was a little late to the party, but there still seemed to be some deals that made sense for me. And I said, there's no time to waste. And I think just that motivation of like, let's get this going. I jumped immediately. The first two deals I got were on the MLS.
Hmm.
And let me back up a step. The first thing I did when I started to try to build a team in North Carolina was property manager. I
Mm.
recognized that if I could build a relationship with a property manager, a lot of the other pieces may fall in place, and that turned out to be true. So I hooked up with a guy named Jesse Marinas, who's still
I get,
out there. He's
I guess like how did you
Yeah.
have a property manager take you seriously if you didn't have any properties?
Well, I think he was just at that place where his company was growing. He didn't have a tremendous amount of clients. He
Okay.
had a lot of experience, so he was looking for clients. And
Mm.
I reached, I in the Bigger Pockets community, I found him on there. I was looking for property managers in Durham, North Carolina, and he was pretty active in the posting. And so he and I kind of started developing a relationship via Bigger Pockets. And then, I said, hey, if I find some interesting properties, would you mind, taking a look at them and just letting me know your thoughts? And he kindly enough did. The first thing I noticed about the real estate, environment was that people tend to be very welcoming to people who are rookies
Mm.
and very willing to share information and network. And I never felt like there was any of this kind of like, snobbery,
Yeah.
that quite frankly, sometimes we find in the film and TV industry. It was kind of refreshing that in real estate, people were very welcoming and very willing to share information and be transparent and all that. So Jesse Marinas was very kind in that he looked at those few deals. So when I actually got one under contract, the first person I met in North Carolina was Jesse, property manager. He showed up at the first property, which was a duplex, with his contractor. And
Oh,
so
wow.
immediately we were able to look at the project. He knew I had it under contract, so he knew that time was of the essence. Contractor looked it over. Jesse looked it over. Funny enough, the other reason why I have a vote of confidence for Jesse is because he told me not to buy this property. I did
Oh,
anyways
wow. Oh,
because
wow.
it was in a flood zone.
Oh,
So
you've told me about this property. That was your
yeah,
first
that was the
purchase?
first one. Yeah.
Oh
So
my God. But you bought it anyway.
well, being from California, I
You're
have
like flood zone. That's not a thing.
floods, like I have a property in Sino, which is borderline on the Sepulveda Dam, right? Like, and
Yeah.
I'm just like, flood zone. Yeah, what's the worst that could happen,
It's
So I
just a
really
little
had,
water.
yeah, I had no idea, how much water we're really talking about.
Yeah.
And this duplex was next to a little creek which back then in my newbie investor mind, I'm like, how quaint. It's cool. It's a nice little creek, a nice view. There's trees, you know.
Oh
When
God.
it rained, that creek rose, and it was insane how much water. The water came lapping up right to the front door. I mean, 1 inch more, and it would have been inside the property. All of the flooring
Oh
would have been
my
destroyed.
God.
You know, as it was, the underpinnings, I'm sure already had some, you know, some probably wood rot
Oh,
developing.
oh my God.
So I bought this first property against Jesse's advice, but he still managed it for me. And by spring of that year, we were already dealing with, you know, issues of rain. Um, Ultimately, for that one, um, and if you're interested in the numbers, I could go over that real quick since we're kind of on the topic. But if you want to
Sure.
dig deeper,
Yeah, go for
yeah.
it. Yeah. What was the
So
purchase
so
price, rehab, and after repair value, all that good
yeah,
stuff?
so because this was my first venture into real estate, and it's an interesting story, I'll kind of dig in a little deeper. But it was a purchase price of 136K, and I ended up putting over about the year that I had it, probably about 20 grand of rehab into it. It already had one tenant in one side in Unit A. Unit B was vacant, and they had just remodeled it, so it looked good. I suspect now, an afterthought, that they probably remodeled it to hide some stuff that was probably necessary due to the rain and all that, maybe leaks or whatever,
Yeah.
flooring issues. But in either case, 136,000 for a duplex, you know, from California. I'm like, you kidding me? That's nothing. You know,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
seems so affordable to me at
Yeah.
the time. Um, and funny enough, you know, 4 months into that property, Jesse was already kind of like, Rich, I might need to bail on you as a property manager, because he was just getting so many issues
Wow.
with the flooding. So I was already thinking exit 4 months in.
Wow.
Um, Nature did me a favor, because of the amount of groundwater in that property. It technically didn't flood, but what happened was two 100-foot trees got uprooted just because the soil was so moist. And one tree hit the other tree, and they both pummeled the property, literally split the thing in half.
Oh
So
my
we've dubbed it
God.
our accidental treehouse because it ended up being a
Oh my
treehouse.
God.
Our tenant was in the kitchen at the time cooking, and
Oh my
it scared the
God.
living daylights out of her. Luckily, nobody was hurt.
Yeah.
Um, but so I got a call that morning, with pictures of the property, and of course, I nearly fell out of the bed, you know, because
Oh
they're three
my
hours ahead
God.
there. And first thing I did was call the insurance company and find out if it was covered, and thankfully it was. So
Yeah.
didn't even have to use the flood insurance; it was covered under my primary insurance because it wasn't technically a flood issue; it was an act of God. And long story short, it took a year for the insurance company to finally consider it a total loss. We had to get contractors involved. The insurance company paid me loss of rents for a year before they finally decided to consider it a loss. This is right at the beginning of COVID, so
Wow.
insurance adjusters were not coming out there in person anymore. They would fly a drone over or do some crazy stuff.
Wow.
So that slowed down the process of the adjuster, you know, finalizing the claim. And at the end of it, I was made whole by the insurance company. Still had this property that was destroyed, not knowing what to do with it. I didn't think I'd get more than maybe $5,000 or $10,000 just for the value of the land, because in my mind, anybody who bought this property was going to have to destroy it and
Yeah.
rebuild.
Yeah.
Um, but little did I expect that I started getting tons of calls from wholesalers and brokers trying to buy this property off of me, and I ended up selling it for $95,000. This
Oh,
destroyed piece of property, mainly because that area was so much in the upswing that they recognized a smart contractor came in and realized they didn't need to level the property. They were able to fix it, turn it around. They didn't have to deal with insurance companies like I did, and so it was a win-win in the end. But
how much, so how much did you get, did you get how much did you get from insurance? And how much?
so the replacement cost estimator was 160,000 for the property, plus another 10,000 on top of that for tree removal, which obviously that was a big part of it. So they paid me up to the 160,000, which
Wow.
covered my costs,
That was like
everything. It was
everything that you put into it.
pretty much break even with maybe a little bit more. But I had also gotten loss of rents for a year, which I think was about $1,000 a month. So that was about another 12K. I
Wow.
came ahead on that. And then when I sold the property, that was all gravy. Yeah. So I came out
Wow.
about 100 grand ahead, $103,000 ahead in the end of that. So
Yeah, I mean, like at the
yeah.
in hindsight, like at the end of that with the insurance claim and being made whole and then selling for the land value, like it seems like, oh yeah, that sounds really nice. Like, oh wow, great, you know. But I have to imagine that okay, you had bought that property how long ago before the tree hit it? 4 months?
It was about, yeah, 4 to 6 months.
Okay.
Four
This is
months
the
later we were having flooding issues, and a couple months
oh
later,
my
is when the
God.
tree
Like
fell. Yeah,
for me, I'm imagining you more like where were you at that time? Because like
yeah,
you don't know that you're going to be made whole. You don't know that you're going to ultimately make like a healthy profit on this property. All you know is that you have this thing that has a ton of issues, and it's your first investment property, your first purchase. What kept you buying properties? Like what kept you going even though you had this like massive headache of a property at the time?
yeah. That's a really good question. So my wife and I both decided going into this real estate journey that we were going to treat it somewhat like a sport. I
Mm,
knew there was going to be some challenges ahead. I mean, not for a minute did I ever kid myself and think it was going to be easy. I
mm,
just didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know what the challenges were going to be. So this was challenge number one. So rather than feeling defeated, yeah, I was afraid, what could
yeah.
happen. I started looking at what are the potential opportunities that could come out of this.
Wow.
I knew I had insurance. I didn't at the time. I didn't think they were going to make me whole. They were going to pay me to basically rebuild. And then so I found a great contractor, Philip Kennedy with Kennedy Contracting, and we walked through a lot of options. We thought about rebuilding it, maybe even into a quad. We thought about extending the back of the property. We started looking at the costs involved with that. Did this make sense? How much was it going to increase the rents? The problem was that at the beginning of COVID, there was two things that happened. Once, it was getting harder and harder to find the labor, and two, prices of materials were really starting to skyrocket at that point.
Hmm.
So as much as things kind of penciled out at the beginning, month after month, we just realized it was going to be really, really cost prohibitive. And eventually, when this property was just so destroyed, it got to a point where the insurance wasn't giving us a check. It was going to take more work to get up and running because of the nature of the roof being open. We had tarps on it, but it was like water coming in there.
Oh
There
my
was
God.
mildew, and little yellow flowers were
Oh
already
my
starting to grow inside
oh
the
my
house.
God.
So, when we had to reassess 6 months later, my contract was like, what we talked about 6 months ago is not the same as now. Cost of materials are higher, and there's going to be more work needed just because this
Yeah.
property's been dormant. So, I just walked through every step of the process. I remember being on set, and every time I had a break, being outside on the phone with the contractor, with the adjuster, trying to figure out my next play here. Ultimately, I was given a gift by the contractor, him saying, "Hey, Rich, I can't do it for what we originally discussed. I don't want to leave you high and dry. I think you need to go back to the adjuster and bid for them to consider it a total loss.
Wow.
I will give you a new estimate to basically, establish, that the cost is going to exceed, the value of this property." And he helped me through that process. And sure enough, he was right. The adjuster, got the picture finally, and made us whole. So
Wow.
all's well that ends well. It was a lot of stress, and I thought I was going to lose my shirt right off the bat, but
Yeah.
never once did I feel like I was going to give up. It was just about, how do I get to the next step? How do I get through this challenge onto the next one? So
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah. I love the perspective that you're sharing about that you and your wife were having, that this is a new thing that you're learning. Of course you're going to make mistakes. Of course you're going to have and like having the expectation that it's going to be hard, not the expectation that everything's going to go well is like, oh man, like I've definitely
yeah,
had some of those moments myself. Like anytime that I change a little bit about my investing strategy or enter into a new thing, I'm noticing that it's like, of course there's going to be things that happen that you aren't able to perceive beforehand, like
yeah,
that's what learning is called. Like that's why it's so important to not jump around too much with investing strategy or with markets or any of these
mhm,
kind of things, because there's always things like that, and if you're a more seasoned investor, if you're changing markets or changing strategies, you can mitigate a lot of that kind of stuff because things carry over. But like there's always things that you learn whenever you do a new strategy, you know. So yeah, so after that property, what was the next purchases that you made?
Yeah, well, actually, at the same time as that purchase, because within a week of each other, I had already closed on the second property. So I had
Oh,
two. I had two. I had the duplex, which had its challenges, and then it was a single family home also in Durham, which went swimmingly. I mean, so I had one that was a nightmare and one that just went as good as it could be. And that was a, single family home about a mile east of downtown Durham. Um, it was a beautiful house, had a solid slab foundation. It was 2 stories, um, nice size yard. It had a lot of positives for it. That one I bought for 129,000. We ended up putting 36K into the rehab. So my all in was about 165. Um, and there was no issues. It just
mm,
went really smooth with that one. We got tenants almost immediately. They were paying, I think at the time, 13.25 a month. So it wasn't quite 1% rule, but it was a solid investment. I still have that property to this date. So that also gave me a little vote of confidence,
mm.
like there's going to be some winners and some losers, you know.
Totally.
And so that first year with that property, that helped. Um, Property number three, which I jumped on a month after that. I mean, I was ready to go. Once I kind
Yeah.
of figured this out, I um, my property manager Jesse, he was also a broker, so he found the third property. It was a quad in Burlington, North Carolina, a little further west. I felt strong about that area because Durham, we could already see the writing on the wall that we're starting to get outpriced in Durham. Because as I
Hmm.
mentioned, I felt like I was late to the party there.
Yeah.
I was lucky to get those two properties, but number three was already starting to become hard to come by. Burlington was in the path of progress, between like Greensboro and Durham, still in the triangle. So it had a lot of merit, a lot of potential, and it was a 4 unit that I bought for 110,000, and we put 100 grand into work. So it was 25K per door, completely down to the studs. New electrical, new plumbing, you name it, roof, everything, floors. We did it all on those. And I was excited because I wanted to do that. I wanted to take that next leap as far as rehab, to see what's involved in really taking it down, all the way to the studs and rebuilding that property. The challenge with that one, all the numbers were great. I mean, it penciled in. The challenge was COVID now was in full swing.
Mm.
And so when we started that project in February, that's when the world was shutting down. And so originally we expected about 2 months of rehab. Um, 4 months in, people were getting really sick. My contractor started losing his crew.
Mm.
Fortunately, he was deemed essential, so he could continue working. But we limped across the finish line getting that rehab done with literally him and his electrician was all that was left of his original crew. Everybody else was sick with COVID.
Wow.
And he would bring in help however he could. And supplies were limited, so we had to get creative on some of the windows and all that. And so we finished that one, I want to say in June of 2020.
And you had
Um,
started it when?
we had started it. I purchased that property January 27th was when I closed on that one, 2020.
That's actually very fast. Even if you had a full crew, that would be fast. To be able to
Now it's fast, yeah.
rehab like a quad in 5 months, like that's
I
really
didn't I
impressive,
didn't know that
actually.
at the time. For me, 5 months seemed like a long time. So it's kind of like what you don't know sometimes. So I was definitely chomping at the bit. And
Yeah.
at that time, there were still more contractors available to do work.
Yeah.
A year later, I found it really difficult to find help. But at
Mm.
that point, we were still in that point where there was still people who were looking for work.
Right before
You
that
know,
crazy
that
upswing.
crazy time where materials
Yeah.
went up and
Yeah.
labor shortages and all that thing. So I was very lucky with the timing of
I,
getting
I
in. Yeah.
I guess, like, what gave you the confidence to do a 100K rehab out of state on your third property? Like, not even your third property. Like, is this your third month buying real estate? You take on a 100K rehab? Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the first prop. So
Wow.
I started listening to Bigger Pockets in October of 2019. I took that Brandon Turner 90-day challenge. I got my first property under contract December 27th of that year. January 2nd was the second one, the single family home. And I think it was January 27th when I closed on that third one. So yeah, literally within a month, 30 days of each other from the first deal to the third, I
Wow.
closed. So I was
Wow.
very quickly. So that's when I started learning things like debt to income ratio and all that. Because when you,
Because they were
I
starting
had
to,
some
the financing
capital.
started to get harder.
Yeah, I had some capital, and I definitely used a conventional loan on the first property. The
Yeah.
second one, DTI became an issue immediately because my lender was like, your debt to income ratio on two loans within a month of each other is going to be a hard pill to swallow. We think we can make it work, but it was creating extra hurdles. I ended up
Wow.
buying that second one cash,
Where
and
where
then
did
the
you
third
where did
one.
you get the cash for yeah, where is
So
the funding
yeah,
coming from for these first purchases?
so it was a combination of, I had saved up about 100K in my savings account,
Okay.
which I knew was kind of earmarked for investing. And then my primary residence really kicked everything off. I had a property in Encino, which I still have today. That was our primary residence. I had bought that in 2014. And by
Okay.
2020, it had appreciated enough that we were able to refi it and pull, I think at the time was about 150K out of it. That was before the market just completely took off. But still,
Yeah.
having, 6 years of appreciation was enough to have 150 grand. So I had about 250K, total, which is not nothing. It was enough to kind of get going. So I was able to buy that, first property conventional, put 20% down. So I had to put, I think it was 25% down as a rental property. So I put, 136K property. I put about close to 40 grand, 38 to 40 grand down. Was able to go cash on the second one to get around my DTI. But by property number three, that's when it was catching up to me. And
Wow,
so at that point,
even with the second property, you didn't have any loan on it, and it was still an issue.
I had a loan on the first property, but not the second property.
Wow.
So the first property's loan, because they were so close, and I had not established any income yet from these properties.
Okay.
By
That's the issue.
property number three, it was catching up to me. So it was a timing thing. There was just not enough time to get all the conventional paperwork in order to close on property number three. So that was my first experience with the hard money loan. I took a hard money loan out, but I only had it for 2 months. I paid it off quickly just to buy me enough time to get financing in place, that kind of thing, and to get a loan on property number two. It was like it was a juggling act.
I love how this is definitely a build the plane as you're falling kind of
Absolutely,
situation
no question about
where
it.
it's like, what are you gonna like to go from no properties to a property in a flood zone and a property that needs 100K and not just like one or two, but you're at this point you're at seven doors in a matter of 2 months.
Yeah, yeah, I was definitely building a plane on my way down to the ground, and I could see the ground rapidly approaching. But I was like, the parachute's coming, it's coming,
I know it. The parachute's coming.
and then of course COVID and everything else came to play.
Oh
But
my God.
as I mentioned, I going into this, I knew I had to kind of see the sport in it, otherwise I would feel defeated. And
Yeah.
for me, I guess it was a mindset thing. I had the mindset that whatever came up was an opportunity for me to try something new, and it was kind of like a grown-up game
Oh
of Monopoly.
man. I love it.
So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get to learn how hard money loans work, what private money is. Now I just learned what debt to income ratio is. Now I understand
I
what when
love
people
it.
say DTI and bigger pocket. What now I get what that means. I just felt like I was adding more and more tools to my tool belt there, and I was still having fun with it, even though I was
Yeah.
scared as heck that I'm going to just destroy our nest egg. But
Yeah.
but luckily I had a contractor now. I had already two projects under my belt with him.
Yeah.
I had Jesse, my property manager, who now I felt confident in. I could trust him because he actually gave me some advice that I didn't follow the first time. We looked at a lot of properties. He told me which ones to stay away from. He told me which neighborhoods were good, which were bad. So I felt he was giving me good advice. He brought Burlington to me, so I felt like, okay, I felt like there was enough fiduciary responsibility he had that he wasn't trying to steer me wrong.
Yeah.
And he really did help oversee the property management on that from the ground up. He kind of helped me with the construction part, just kind of understanding that process.
Yeah.
So I felt like I had a team in the making that I was kind of falling back on already, and don't forget, I was working, 12 hours a day on set while this was all going down. So I didn't have a ton of free time. but like every spare second I had, I was on the phone, you know, uh, or on my laptop, trying to work out issues. So, but definitely it was a sport, no question about it.
Yeah, I love this idea of exactly how you said it. Like this is a sport that I'm learning this. Oh, another opportunity to learn a new thing. Like
Yeah,
this. So as I've shared with you, as we've talked about, 7 months ago, I was teaching high school still. I was teaching high school
yeah,
still, which I'd done for 14 years. And since I've gone full-time real estate investing, the number of lessons that I've learned that and like things that have kept me awake at night because I'm like, how do I manage this? How do I do this? And like just keep going. Like just keep going forward. And I find a solution. Like I had a tenant that had agreed to move out of a property of mine here in LA that we're flipping, and like everything was agreed upon, and then he couldn't find a place. And then it's like, oh my God, actually I'm a hostage now to this tenant because he won't leave, and I'm in a, a city that does not favor my side of the equation. So it's like I had to learn how to manage that kind of situation. I had to learn how to navigate that kind of situation. Like I had a property in Cleveland that we didn't find out until a week after that the seller had been fined for having lead-based paint, and that like this kid that was in the property was essentially having symptoms of being poisoned by lead-based paint. And it's like,
geez.
oh, now that you own the property, actually that fine is yours. Like you have to resolve that. And I was like, oh my God, how do I
Yeah,
do that? Like, how do I resolve? Like, this is super important. Like this, yeah, there's like literally it's someone's health that's in my hands now. And the
yeah,
previous owner, he just like shirked his responsibility. And so now I have to learn how to deal with that. And at the time I was like, oh my God, the first bids that we got were like $35,000 for this thing that we had not even put in our underwriting, like for the deal. And then I just got more bids. I just talked to more people. I went on Bigger Pockets. I asked for help. I started calling other people like, what do I do with this? And that people are like, just get more bids. Like you're gonna be
mhm,
fine. You need to get it some more people walking it. You're gonna find somebody that's able to do it. We ended up getting somebody that did a great job, resolved it for like 8 grand, which was not fun, but it was like,
yeah,
oh, like I know how to deal with this now. Like I've learned how to navigate this challenge as an opportunity, as opposed to like, oh, woe is me. How could somebody do this to me? No, like it's like working out at the gym. Like
yeah,
you don't get stronger by walking away from the weights. You get stronger by lifting them up, because it's hard. That's actually what makes you stronger, and that's what every deal that I've had, some of these things that like I've gained some sort of skill, some sort of strength from it. And I'm like, I'm totally seeing that in your story.
yeah. It's so right. You the learning process is what makes you grow. And if you can have the right mindset going into it, then you can welcome those changes that are going to come rather than shy away from them and just throw in the towel. And it is a sport, fortunately it's a team sport, as you know. There's always somebody in the community you could call and get advice. There's always another contractor, hopefully, depending on where you are in the COVID cycle. But there are people out there, that can help you if you just put yourself out there and you use your network. And fortunately, I've been blessed with a lot of people who have been very generous with their time and their information. And of course, just lots of books out there too, and that's helped me get through those hurdles and feel like at the end of it, I'm a stronger investor for it.
Totally. So after you have these 7 units, you stabilize them, everything goes well, and I mean, I don't think you got to share it, but I know really quickly give the numbers for that quad for what you
Yeah,
spent, what you got it for, the appraisal, because it's like a home run deal.
yeah. So I paid 110 for it, and then it was almost exactly 100 grand into it for the rehab, about 25 grand per door. So 210,000. When we got the appraisal back, it appraised at 287.
Mm,
So I want to say it was pretty close to a perfect burr. I mean, I really got just about all my money back on that, and maybe a little bit more. So once again, that was like wind beneath my sails, man. That was like, wow, this works. I had proof in concept now because this was the first one that like kind of got all my money back. And we had one tenant in there when I bought the property who wanted to stay. So we relocated them into one of the newer units. And then I think at that point our rents were about 600 per door after we did the rehab. Now they're at 850 per door. So there's been an increase, definitely in the NOI, the net operating income for that property. Um, and we still have it. So it's still working for us. So that one definitely was a home run. I've been trying to repeat that. It's a little harder to come by now, but and that's a great area, the Burlington area, but it's been harder to find those properties. So I kept working myself west. After that property, then I moved on to Winston-Salem. An inspector that was looking at another property for me, I passed on the property. It had too much termite damage, but he had suggested me purchasing a home from his mother, an elderly woman who was looking to get out of her property. She had a tenant in there. So my next investment was a $60,000 single family, 2 bedroom, 1 bath home in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, a little further west of Burlington. And that one I kind of sat on for a couple of years. I had a tenant in place. She was paying 600 a month. The property was 60,000. So it was like 1% rule without me doing
yeah,
anything.
yeah,
And I'm like, well, I've spent enough capital as it is. Let me just sit on that one. And when the tenants, assuming the tenant keeps paying her rent, I'll wait on that one until she's ready to locate. That one took a couple of years before she actually moved out. Um, and that one had its challenge because by the time she moved out, we started the rehab. There were no more contractors.
mm,
So I was running into that issue. So we took a couple months of just like property managers trying to find contractors. I finally found a contractor I felt really good about who promised he'd be done with the rehab. It was supposed to be about a 30K rehab. He said he'd be done in 6 weeks. Didn't happen. It took 8 months.
oh my
So
God,
8 months on that one. And it was like he did add a lot of value on top of what he promised. Of course, what started out to be 30 grand ended up being 75.
oh my God,
And what started to be 6 weeks took 8 months.
oh my God,
So my all in for
nightmare.
that property, yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare. I all in was at about 140 for that one.
Oh man,
And we did find a tenant at that point for 1250. So it was a little less than 1% rule. But over the next couple of years, we've managed to get the rents up. So now the rents are at 1450. So we're right around 1% rule now, if you kind of look in hindsight.
what did it appraise for, or did you
Oh,
refinance
so
it, or
yeah, so it appraised for 160. So
okay,
more than I put into it. So it wasn't a
yeah,
complete loss. Of course, I had to leave money in the deal, but it moved up, and right now it's worth probably about 192, somewhere in that
wow,
ballpark.
okay,
So it's worth keeping. It wasn't a home run, but it was kind of a base hit, but that's
yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah,
I didn't lose my shirt, and we did a ton of work on it, so it's stable. The tenants are happy. Rents have increased in that area tremendously. So right now we're getting 1450 for it, and I think it's a little under market value, but I want to keep the tenants happy. So there's room to grow. So
nice.
yeah,
And
so
then
that one's been steady. Yeah.
that's great. And then so you do have another multifamily property, right? Is that
I
accurate?
have no, everything else I have. The only other multifamily I have is my primary residence right now, which is a duplex.
Okay.
So
Can
everything else
you
is single families. Yeah.
talk about some of the maybe differences or learnings that you've had versus investing out of state versus, you're in So you live in South Pasadena, which is a very desirable area, and a very expensive area in LA. Yeah, can you talk about navigating that? Because you're kind of in the middle actually of doing new construction right now at your
Yeah,
primary.
yeah, it's been interesting. California versus North Carolina, a couple big differences. One is North Carolina is very landlord friendly.
Hmm.
So that made it easy, especially in markets. I have some other properties in North Carolina that are in a little bit more challenged areas,
Yeah,
higher turnover rates and that kind
yeah,
of thing. And being landlord friendly, it makes it easier when you need to evict. If somebody's just not paying their rent or destroying your property, you can fairly easily get them out. The
yeah,
laws kind of support the landlord. In
yeah.
California, as you know, there's rent control. Tenants have a lot of rights here, maybe for good reason, but they do have a lot of rights. So you really have to vet your tenants here. You've got to be really super careful and make sure that you've got somebody that you feel very confident about, because you're probably going to be with that tenant for a while. And if you mess up, they have all the rights. So it kind
Yeah.
of ups the stakes a little bit as an owner. So yeah, so the reason I decided to kind of set my sights back on California was I like the stability of this market, and it's my backyard. It's where I live. So having, tremendous cash flow in North Carolina and been fortunate enough to have appreciation, but there's been no guarantee of that. California in the long term is a good appreciation move. And the properties I have now, I don't ever plan on selling them. I think they're long-term buy and holds.
Hmm.
So the first time I did my primary residence before was in Encino. That was a house that we bought for $600,000 in 2014. And we were right on the cusp of deciding whether to sell that one or keep it. Um, and we got very fortunate. It came in with a high appraisal at 1.2 million,
Oh man.
7.5 years later.
Yeah,
So it doubled. It doubled in
yeah,
7.5 years. And that allowed us to be able to refinance that and get a pretty good chunk of change out of it, and make the next move and hold on to that one. If I had sold it, maybe I would have gotten 1.2, maybe I would have gotten a million. I would have had closing costs and all of that. And I would have lost that potential. But we were just at the point of being cash flow positive on that one, and maybe a couple $100 ahead a month. And I'm like, if I can stay cash flow positive where it's not a drain on my finances, I'm going to hold on. And holding on in California to a property that's even slightly cash flow positive on a long-term rental, I felt like it was a win.
totally.
So that one was kind of no brainer. We kept it there. Our primary residence now in California is actually a duplex. It's interesting because my wife and I were looking for a property to relocate our family to. When my son was turning 3, we knew that we were getting into school age. She wanted to go to private school, and as an investor, I said, I am not going to put the money into a private school. We're going to find a really nice house in a great school district, and I'm going to put the money into an investment
Oh, I
in the
love it.
property.
I love it.
Education is important, but I just cannot see myself throwing that money away towards a private school.
Yeah.
So we knew that South Pasadena was a good fit for us. And the fact that there was no inventory here, everybody was thinking the same way. They all wanted to be here for their kids.
Hmm.
So when we came across this duplex, my wife actually found it. We walked in just kind of on a fluke. We said, let's just take a look. And we discovered it had an adjoining door between the 2 units. So that has allowed us to treat it like a primary residence. It's a little funky because it's got 2 kitchens, and I turned one into an office space.
So you don't rent out the other side of the duplex?
We don't. We actually did for a month just to get it on paper, because that helped us with our debt to
The
income
DTI
ratio and
game,
making the
yeah.
move. Yeah, the
Yeah.
DTI game. But we've made it work as our primary residence. If we need to, that's the other thing with real estate. Unlike stocks, you get in trouble, you can move into your house. You can't move into your stocks. You know what I mean? So just knowing that if we had some financial issues, especially in this wacky industry of film and television,
Yeah.
we could always rent out one side and move into the other. So it was always a move that we had options, and I liked having some options.
Hmm.
The added advantage of it being a duplex is now we are able to build not one but 2 ADUs in our backyard. So hence the project we're about to embark on next week. We're going to build 2 ADUs, create some income for this property, which will really severely help to offset this hefty mortgage here. So that was kind of like the initial thought moving in here. This was a stepping stone. Eventually, we'll turn it into a quad. when rates are more favorable, we'll refi out of this and get into our, hopefully our forever home. But
Yeah.
so
I
far
love
it's
the
working out that way.
yeah, I love the idea of you don't really want roommates, I guess, at your current stage in life and your family and your kids and stuff like that. But as soon as you move out of there, you're gonna be able to rent out. You're gonna have literally a duplex that's gonna be the very easy transition. I feel like when you do decide that it's time to be able to turn it into a rental property.
Yeah, and that's a no-brainer. I had a desktop appraisal done recently on this property because my biggest concern, and this is something for your viewers to consider, ADUs are a great investment for cash flow, especially if it's in your backyard or if you're doing a conversion. When you're doing a heftier build like we are, new construction from the ground up, two ADUs, each one's about 672 square feet. It doesn't necessarily add more value to your property from an equity standpoint than the money you're putting into the ADU. So to kind of go over the numbers a little bit, we're putting in about $550,000 into these ADUs for both combined. But what it's going to add in property value is probably best case scenario 400 to 450. So potentially we have a net, a net income, not a net income, but a net value decrease of about 100 to 150K. But we have a cash flow coming in of about $3,000 per door, so $6,000 a month, and positive cash flow, and that's probably going to be about at least a couple grand. So for me, the trade-off in equity for cash flow made sense, especially since this is a long-term play. We're going to be in this thing
Yeah.
forever. Yeah, in
Yeah.
California.
Yeah. I mean, like this I mean, there's so many ways that for me, like if the only way that you can look at an investment is in year one ROI, then you're gonna miss out on a lot of opportunities, like especially like nothing works in California in year one. Like not, I mean, maybe some parts of California, like if we're looking pure ROI, but then
Mhm.
I know some very, very successful people that they have like 8 or 9 properties in California, but they
Yeah.
bought them 10, 15 years ago. And I mean, it's the ROI in that for them is like a 50% ROI, like
Yeah.
versus like what they invested. But you can't be in a rush in California. You
Right.
can't be in a rush. And I think, it's part of what's the perfect investment? There's no perfect investment. There is an investment that complements your portfolio that is in line with your investing goals. It's part of an ecosystem. And yeah, I mean, we've talked about your ADU a lot.
We have talked about it a lot. And by the way, thank you. You've been a source of wisdom on this
Oh,
project as
thanks.
well, because
Yeah.
like any new venture, it's very easy to get cold feet, especially when you're waiting. It's been almost 2 years since we kind of started
Oh
drawing
my
plans up for this.
God.
So now that we are about to break ground next week, I'm starting to have cold feet and going, is this really a smart move putting $550,000 into a new build? But
Yeah.
fortunately, I have mentors and
Yeah.
friends to
Yeah.
to support me in hopefully making a good
Yeah.
decision. Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about this, but I'm reminded of my business partner, John. He owns a property in Marina Del Rey that is in a coastal zone, which is like a nightmare to build on.
Okay.
And they have an ADU on it, which is a nightmare to get approved in the coastal commission.
Yeah.
And like that property, like and they only got it a couple years ago. They only got it a couple years ago. Oh my God! If they were like, all right, let's sell. They will all double their money.
Yeah.
Like and it's cash flowing $1,000 a month. This one property that they have in a great area that is totally supply constrained. Okay, the caveat is they have a lot of money stuck in the deal still. They have a lot of
Mhm.
money stuck in the deal still, and they really had to be patient. They really had to be patient. They had to be okay, each of them living like 100 grand in that deal. And there's that area is only going to get better. Like
Yeah.
they're not making more beach. Like they're not making like all of these coastal cities are have extremely challenging rules for development for good reason, you know. and and just like South Pass, they're not, South Pasadena, any sort of buildable area is extremely limited. That like the amount of inventory, the amount of space, like it's surrounded by people that are like, we don't want any aspect of this city to change. And so if you want something to change, it's got to be very it's very controlled, and that if you are the person that owns the property, it only helps you in the long run. It only makes what you have and what you build more valuable, so I think it's going to be a great decision, but
Yeah, you're
you're
right.
the
The
one
the
that
bear
is putting up the money though, like I'm
well,
just
yeah,
talking.
but you're right. The barrier to entry to get into, build a property in this city is pretty high. It's a long permitting process. It's a small community and a big community. It's a very desirable neighborhood. But those are the things that will help your values sustain themselves over time, for sure. And for me, cash flow, I am my immediate target is financial freedom, and
Mhm.
I'm well on my way towards that. I think, but my goal is by the end of 2024 to be there, and I think we're on track for that. So cash flow is king for me, but really the power of cash flow is not, necessarily replacing your income. That's part of it, but it buys time. That's really the value of it.
Hmm.
And in a place like California, if you could even just come out very subtly cash flow ahead, the real value is in allowing you not to take a hit in your finances. If you're cash flow positive even a little bit, it buys you time for that appreciation to really kick
Hmm.
in. And that's why I'm doing California. It's really about that long-term growth appreciation. North Carolina really is more about the cash flow. That's really the priority over there. Appreciation's gravy. And I love the idea of diversifying my portfolio, on two coasts and very different types of markets where one kind of supports the other. And hopefully it's a little bit of a balancing act where I can kind of get the best of both. So it's kind of a hybrid approach to my portfolio in a
Love it.
sense.
Love it. Awesome. Man, Richard, this has been such a pleasure. I just love our calls anyway, but just it's been so great to speak in this way and be able to share out your story. I'd love to ask you some quick fire questions just to finish this off.
Sure.
And then yeah. So, all right, first question. What is your favorite way to give back to your community?
My favorite way is whenever I see somebody on Bigger Pockets or at a meetup and they have questions about what to do next in their journey. And if I have any experience in that area, I love talking real estate first and foremost. But if I can help somebody to maybe take that next step or maybe get over that fear or that hurdle, that's an opportunity for me to give back because I had so many people who've mentored me and been a source of great information to me. So if I could give back by educating first and foremost, and helping out if it needs to take another step and they want me to look at their deal or whatever, I'm happy to offer my input. So that's a biggie for me.
Awesome. And what advice would you give to a newer investor for, what advice would you give them?
Take action.
Hmm.
Certainly do your homework, read. There's tons of content out there on YouTube, Bigger Pockets, but take action. You're never really going to truly learn until you're doing it. For me, that has been my best lesson is taking that first property, knowing that there's going to be challenges, but just going in and just taking the next step bit by bit as it comes up and reaching out to your network if you need help. That's worked for me.
Love it. And then what do you do when you're not investing and you're not on at work on set?
Yeah, well, with two young kids, a 5-year-old and a 1.5, most of my free time is spent in some way either changing diapers or going on bike rides with my 5-year-old. So I'm really enjoying, being a little bit of an older dad, but having a little freedom right now to spend time with the family. So that's a big part of it. And then I also dabble in music. I play a little piano. You and I were talking about this before, so whether it's listening music or playing on a piano or something to kind of get those creative juices flowing, I love to do that as well.
Cool. And yeah, where can folks reach out to you if they want to connect to you? What's the best way for them
Yeah,
to connect with you?
I'm easy to find on Bigger Pockets, either under my name, Richard Mercado, or under my company, Happy Investors LLC. I'm also on Instagram, Happy Investors LLC, and Facebook, Happy Investors LLC. So, or feel free to send me an email, rich at happyinvestorsllc.com. Pretty easy to get a hold of.
I like that name of that. Man, I should have taken that. That's great. Happy
Well,
Investors
that
LLC.
goes hand in hand in my wife and I, our original view that we would always treat real estate as a game or sport first and foremost, and try to go in this with an open mind and a smile on our faces. It doesn't always work, but it's a good place to start, at least.
I love that. Yeah. And I can be reached at Educated Invest. That's my website. That's my Instagram handle. That's my LinkedIn, all the stuff. Educated Invest. Cool. Well, Richard, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, bro.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks so much, Philip.
Yeah. 100%. Hope you enjoyed the conversation between me and Richard. I had a great time. I think my biggest takeaway from the conversation with him was I loved his perspective of looking at investing as a sport, and just like any sport, you take your tumbles every now and then. But if you stay in the game and you keep working, keep pushing forward, keep moving forward, you can have huge gains, huge benefits that, like 5 years ago, his portfolio was zero and his passive income was nothing. And now he didn't share this on the podcast, but I believe his passive income is over 4K, 5K a month from his portfolio, and the amount of equity that he's built from, this 250K that he leveraged from his first few properties is well over $1 million worth of equity. So, yeah, man, I think it's awesome. If you stay in the game and you keep playing, you end up learning a thing or two, especially if you look at these kind of things as opportunities. Hope you had a good listen, and yeah, please like, subscribe, share, and look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Kept myself held down so long, I lost the key. Say who stops you from your dreams? I know that it's just me. Oh, I can't live this way and feel this way, but my friend, we've all got bills to pay. Oh, I can't live